Call to order the April 15th meeting of the Salem Planning Commission. Jennifer, if you would please call the roll for us.
Commissioner Cotton. Here. Commissioner Fryback.
Here.
Commissioner Heller is absent. Commissioner Howard.
Here.
Commissioner Rhodes. Here. Commissioner Slater.
Here.
Commissioner Tuck. Here. Commissioner Truitt.
Here.
Commissioner Guerrero.
Here.
We have four.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us on a very nice Tuesday evening. Before we go for the minutes, is there anyone here who has some comment to make that is not on, that's an issue not on the agenda today? All right. All right, in that case, I look to Commissioner Rhodes for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from March 4th, 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner T. Any discussion? All right, Jennifer, you call the roll again, please.
Commissioner Buck. Aye. Commissioner Fryback.
Stay.
Commissioner Larvick.
Stay.
Commissioner Rhodes. Aye. Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Commissioner Tuck. Aye. Commissioner Truitt.
Aye.
Commissioner Guerrero.
Motion passes, I guess. Commissioner Truitt, is there a correction that you needed?
Yeah.
That I missed?
Sorry, I'm confused. I was absent for this one. The last one I was at was the joint session council. So I believe I'm present. Does that happen to anyone else as you just been?
Okay. If we can just move forward.
You, Council, or Commissioner, I think you voted aye, or do you want to change your vote?
Yeah, I will abstain. I'll change my vote. Since I'm present.
I think it puts us at 4, is that correct? So motion doesn't carry.
We have five.
Good, fine.
Close call, a bad way to start a meeting. All right, we're gonna have Laurel go first on the Planning Development Code related to right of way dedication, and then we'll shuffle a little bit and we're gonna have the state presentation, and then we will turn to the floodplain issue. That's all right with everybody? So Laurel, take it away, please. Sure, you can do without the screen.
Definitely need it for the other.
Why don't we take a 5-minute recess here? Introduce ourselves, not scare our staffers. 5 minutes.
Good job.
All right, thank you.
Apologies for the delay.
Thanks for the success. All right, let's go ahead.
All right, my name is Laurel Christian. I'm here to present Code Amendment
Oh,
25.
sorry, I rushed it. I apologize. Jennifer, I think we need a criteria review. All right, thank you. Let's do that first. We're so excited.
This is a public hearing to consider case number CA 2501 for proposed amendments to the Salem Revised Code, updating the city zoning and development code known as the Unified Development Code. The proposed amendments relate to right-of-way dedications in the city of Salem. The changes will clarify the process for accepting encumbered property and will amend the code to allow right-of-way dedications by a deed of dedication. The criteria applicable to this hearing are listed in the Salem Revised Code under chapters 110.085. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the planning commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The planning commission will then either continue the public hearing.
Thank you. Again, Laurel Christian, I'm an infrastructure planner with the city of Salem, and I'm here to present Code Amendment 25-01 for code amendments relating to right-of-way dedications. With me this evening is Alan Dannon, the city engineer, who can also help answer questions if you have any. At this time, I would like to enter this presentation and the staff report into the record. I have a pretty quick presentation for you this evening on this code amendment. I'll briefly describe the proposed amendments, discuss the public comments received, and provide an overview of the applicable criteria as well as the staff recommendation. The first piece of the code amendment is to amend chapter 200 to clarify the process for accepting encumbered right-of-way, easements, and property. The current code prohibits the city from accepting property, easements, or right-of-way which are subject to liens or other encumbrances unless an adjustment to this section is approved. For example, right-of-way for a new street may be required as a condition of a development, and that existing property area is encumbered by an easement for access to neighboring property. The current code would require that owner to quitclaim the easement before the right-of-way can be dedicated unless an adjustment is approved. The proposed amendments eliminate the requirement to obtain an adjustment and allow the city to accept encumbered property when the easement holder consents in writing and the encumbrances do not prevent the city's planned uses of the area. In this example, the roadway being proposed as right-of-way would replace the access easement and benefit both parties by remaining to provide access. The expectation is that good faith efforts would still be made by the applicant to eliminate the encumbrance. However, these amendments will simplify the exceptions process for applicants. The second piece of the code amendment is to amend chapter 803 to allow right-of-way dedications to be received by the city and dedicated to the public by either a plat or a deed of dedication. The current code requires right-of-way to be dedicated to the city on a plat. Currently, if there is no platting action associated with the street improvement project, the needed right-of-way is acquired by a warranty deed, and then the city council, city staff takes a request to city council that city council adopt a resolution to dedicate the deeded areas right-of-way to the public for its use and benefit. This process is time-consuming, inefficient, and poses problems related to land divisions as well as current state law. By codifying the use of a deed of dedication to receive right-of-way and simultaneously dedicating the right-of-way to the public for its use and benefit, we free up time and resources of multiple city staff as well as city council. The code updates a standard practice that has not been revised in the city since 1979. The proposed amendment mimics current county right-of-way acquisition and dedication processes and conforms to state law. The proposed amendment will also simplify the process for landowners and developers. We received one public comment on the proposed amendment. The public comment supported the amendment, however, requested that section 803, the second piece of the amendment, be amended to include an exemption that would allow the city to accept encumbered property as in some cases that would be necessary. The code amendment includes changes to section 200.050, the first piece of the amendment, which includes that exemption process for the city to accept encumbered right of way under certain circumstances. To address these comments, staff has modified the proposed amendments in 803 to point to the exemption process in 200. The modified code language is included in the proposed amendments attached to the staff report. Approval criteria for code amendments can be found in Salem Revised Code Chapter 110.085. Staff recommended findings for how the approval criteria are met are provided within the staff report. We have found that the proposed amendments meet the applicable approval criteria. And staff recommends that the planning commission adopt the facts and findings of the staff report and that the city council conduct first reading on the ordinance bill to amend SRC chapters 200 and 803 as prepared by city staff.
All right,
That
thank you.
concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Please.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So in the public comment, it mentions the city's struggling to process replats and other infill developments. I was curious if this amendment to the code will make it easier to do the housing, and if you could explain.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so the current prohibition to accepting encumbered property is holding up some plats for reporting. So essentially, if someone has a plat that they want recorded and there's an existing easement on the property, you're required to be quitclaim. So if the easement holder says, no, I won't quitclaim my easement, then there's not a mechanism, unless they go through the adjustment process, to have that plat recorded, because it's not technically free and clear of encumbrances. So by this code amendment changing, it would allow us to accept that encumbrance as long as it doesn't prohibit our use of the property and the easement holder agrees. Another good example that we run into very often is infrastructure easements for things like power and internet. And PGE does not want to give up their easements, but we also allow their infrastructure in the right of way. So that is a reasonable scenario where we accept that right of way that's encumbered by a PGE easement because we've allowed the infrastructure in the right of way. So yes, we do anticipate that this will help speed up some of those planning processes that are currently stuck because of the prohibition to accepting encumbered right of way.
Any other questions? Not, Vice President Funk for motion.
I move.
Sorry, one more time. Is there anyone here who would like to testify on this? No. All right, I will close the hearing. Thank you. And then Commissioner Clark.
I move that we accept or adopt the staff report for case number CA 25-01 for proposed amendments updating city zoning and development code relating to right of way dedications.
Was there a second? Second, Commissioner Warren. Any other questions? If not, all right, Jennifer, do you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Fox?
Aye.
Commissioner Kravitz?
Aye.
Commissioner Leonard?
Aye.
Commissioner Dobbs?
I
Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Commissioner Depp? Aye. Commissioner True?
Aye.
Commissioner Mayor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you, Laurel. And now we will turn it over to Mr. Wortman and his colleagues. So the context briefly on this is that we've heard a number of presentations over the years on the work that the city has been doing to improve our sustainability and resilience. And I thought it would be useful to hear from the state agencies, which have a large footprint within the city, and have an opportunity to ask them some questions about what their future plans are. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. Let me get our slides up here. To share my screen. Okay. Okay, well, thank you, Chair Slater and commissioners for having us here. I'm Dave Wortman. I'm with the Oregon Department of Administrative Services. I've got folks here from the Department of Transportation, Department of Corrections, and Department of Forestry as well. So we're going to do a little bit of a guess, a presentation together on what we're doing around issues around sustainability and resiliency. We did receive your good neighbor letter, and we tried to follow that as much as we could to address the questions you had in there. There was a lot, so we're going to touch on as much as we can here, and hopefully have some discussion and answer your questions. And if we need to do any follow-up, we can certainly do that. So maybe this is a beginning of an ongoing discussion. So, with that, I just wanted to start with kind of big picture about our state government. In essence, we're sort of a small city, if you will, although spread across all of Oregon, about 45,000 employees. If you do a count, we have about over 100 agencies, boards, and commissions. That's everything from our agencies down to Department of Aviation or Board of Dentistry, things like that. So really wide spectrum of agencies, boards, and commissions. We have 19 agencies that own land in some capacity, some more than others. So Department of Forestry, for example, or Department of State Lands, quite a bit of land. That's what this map is showing. Part of the state, and others own smaller parcels, but we all are managing our land in some way. And then collectively, we have over 17 million square feet of buildings. So that's everything from the Oregon State Hospital down to small maintenance facilities. Our agency, Department of Administrative Services, we have about 2.2 million square feet just in Salem. So we own a lot of the buildings and agencies are our tenants. Land, agencies own about 1.7 million acres statewide. Again, we are located all over Oregon, not just Salem, so Edmonton, Eugene, Central Point, places like that. So my agency, Department of Administrative Services, we are the administrator for state government, if you will. So we help run state government. Our customers are the other agencies, and we help implement executive orders. We manage our fleets, our statewide fleet, 4,000 cars. And we have a lot of agencies that are our tenants. My office, the Office of Sustainability, is within DAS, our Enterprise Asset Management Division. So we are driven a lot by the Oregon Sustainability Act. It's in our statute, and it has a definition of sustainability. It's usually developing and protecting resources in a manner that meets their current needs, looks at future generations, and looks at the perspective of environment, community, and so we develop statewide policy. Our agency has authority to do that around things like energy and resource conservation, how we manage our fleets, how we procure things. So we have a sustainable procurement policy that says purchase things that are energy and water efficient, for example. We help implement executive orders, and there have been orders, particularly in the Brown administration, around energy efficiency, climate issues, water, and other topics. My office, we are a mighty office of two, by the way, myself and one other person. So we serve as a resource for agencies, we provide technical support, guidance, and help facilitate whatever needs to be done with agencies. And then we support what's called the Oregon Sustainability Board, which is a 11-member board, all appointed by the governor, and they oversee agency. Chair Slater was at our last meeting. They oversee agency performance around things like, are you managing your buildings for energy efficiency? Are you conserving resources? And then that board also helps engage with communities around Oregon. So they travel to different parts of the state and have meetings there and listen to what their issues are, and try to figure out how they can help support them. So in terms of how we are setting goals around to this topic, we're certainly influenced by Oregon legislation and other programs. So there's legislation that says our big utilities have to be sourcing their electricity 100% from clean energy by 2040. We have statute that says that for us, any light duty vehicle, so you think of like a sedan or a smaller, just a regular car versus a big van or bus or something. Wherever we can, that those have to be EVs when we purchase those electric vehicles from this year on. And then there are programs like our Department of Quality Protection Program, Clean Fuels Program. And we have executive orders, as I mentioned. We also have something called House Bill 3409, which affects all buildings. So I'm sure you've got some in the city that are 35,000 square feet or larger, have to meet certain energy performance targets by certain dates. So we have several buildings in state government that have to meet those targets. Standards for efficient equipment and Executive Order 1720, which was Governor Brown, said that all new state office buildings have to be designed to be what's called carbon neutral ready. So which means they have to be super efficient in that design to be able to accommodate things like solar photovoltaics. We have 20 agencies that have sustainability plans on a wide number of topics. Again, we have statewide policy on energy resource conservation, use of our fleet to encourage fuel conservation, and then how we procure certain things. In terms of building energy efficiency, so our Oregon Department of Energy tracks building performance every year through a program called the State Energy Efficient Design, or SEED program. And so we have about 300 state buildings that are over 5,000 square feet that get tracked. And the agencies have to be working toward making those buildings more efficient over time. We have agencies that are participating in Energy Trust Oregon. I don't know what the city does, but we have a program called Strategic Energy Management that agencies participate in. We're always doing energy audits and then tuning up their buildings over time. Any new building construction or major renovation has to go through the Department of Energy's SEED program, which basically requires our buildings to be 20% more efficient than. So we have a kind of a built-in requirement to make our buildings very energy efficient. And then our agency is going to be working with all the other agencies on assessing all the equipment in the buildings and greenhouse gas emissions associated with that. So think about cooling equipment and tracking all that in a database so that we can be making wise decisions as we do retrofits and swap out equipment in the future. Like you folks, probably in the city, upfront capital costs are a challenge, a big challenge, and there are a lot of competing priorities for dollars. So it is a challenge for us as well. Your letter asked about renewable energy, so I wanted to provide a quick chart on kind of where we stand in terms of agencies in renewable energy. We have 8 agencies that have an on-site solar installation of some kind. Some, as you can see, more than others. This totals about 2.3 megawatts. We have a program called 1.5% for green energy technology. So a project that's over a certain size, again, a new building or a major renovation, has to dedicate 1.5% of the project budget for renewable energy. Usually, almost always solar panels on the building. Other projects, Zachariah might be able to talk about the Solar Highways Program, Department of Transportation. We are building a new 250 kilowatt solar array out of our parking services on Airport Way. And we are also doing a renewable energy feasibility study for all of our portfolio in Salem and other places in 2025-26. We have a called our climate action planning tool because the state has set goals around greenhouse gas emissions. We as agencies are trying to eat our own dog food. So basically looking at how we can address emissions in our own operations. So looking at, again, our buildings, how can we make them more efficient? How can we cut down on the fleet use? How can we address things like commuting? A wide range of topics. And so, again, this is sort of a lead by example thing. So it's an ongoing process that we can look at our inventory and our operations, we can set goals, and look at different strategies. We also have, we're in the middle of revising it right now, but we have an online sustainability dashboard that shows how our agencies are performing with respect to energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions. We're adding water use to it this year. And then we're also adding recycling. So again, we're trying to be transparent, trying to show how we're doing. We're going to be talking about this to other folks in Oregon. We won't be doing it ourselves. And we should have this back up this week. I'd be happy to provide that with continue. I mentioned the Oregon Sustainability Board. Again, these are folks from around the state, volunteers, you are, and they are appointed by the governor. They meet quarterly, and again, they help agencies with their sustainability efforts, but also support communities. This was a meeting a few years ago in out of the Port of Morrow. The board, we had a kind of a 2-day off-site meeting there. We went and toured the Boardman coal plant. It was still really fascinating. So where we're going, our building portfolio. So this year we are working on design guidelines for our portfolio. We used to have these for my time, and then they went away, and so now we're bringing them back. And so how can we all design our buildings as agencies to be efficient, address things like resiliency and adapting to a changing climate? How can we be cost effective? How can we address this issue of needing to be carbon neutral for that executive order I mentioned? So this will be a really interesting process. And I don't know, I'm assuming there may be opportunities to work either with you folks or the Capital Planning Advisory Board or the Capital Planning Commission, in some capacity to help us shape these. In terms of our fleet, we're adding about 250 to 300 EV chargers around Salem. Many of those have already been installed. We are adding to our EV fleet as much as we can when vehicles are available. It's been a challenge. We're looking to establish an EV project fund. We have a funding ask this year in the legislature to have some additional staffing to help build up programs so we can help other agencies with their EV charging infrastructure. Again, funding challenges. If we were to look at electrifying our whole fleet, it would be about $300 million. That's the vehicles that have charged. Landscapes. I know this is one that's of interest to you folks. So I've been talking to Chair Slater about a program that we are looking at doing, which is developing a new landscape policy and guidelines for agencies. We don't have anything right now. Other states do. But how can we all work together to look at things like plant selection and where do we actually want turf or don't we? Low impact development, irrigation. We already have a pest management IPM group that meets, so building on that. And then looking at things like habitat protection enhancement. We talked with the University of Oregon on helping us with this developing the best practice guide for graduate students and others there. So we're pretty excited about that. And again, hopefully an outcome is some best practices for how we manage our landscapes. Right now, it's basically project by project. If anybody's familiar with our executive building on Cottage Street, it's an old post office. We just did a major renovation, moved in about 2 months ago. We had a lot of aspirations for this project: reclaimed water, on-site solar, making the building fully electrified, all these things, and frankly ran into the hard reality of budgets. These kind of projects are usually, the budgets are done about 2 years in advance, because that's the way our budgeting works. So when we get to a point and construction costs have gone through the roof, so to speak, it really constrains us. And so we did what we could on this building, and we got the building to be very energy efficient. We almost got LEED gold, we were about 1 point shy of that. We did remove a lot of the lawn, if you go by there, planted native shrubs and grasses. And we used what's called the social impact checklist to look at equity design construction of the building. So we're proud of the building. And one thing we did do is we made it solar ready. We made it heat pump ready. So didn't want to preclude those opportunities, even though the budget would support it now. You know, that's kind of where we're going. So we want to make sure we adapt and do that in the future. And that's where I'm going to pause. And I think what I'm going to do is just stay here, advance the slides, and then let my colleagues speak from down there. So, Zachariah, you're up first.
Great, sounds good. For the record, my name is Zachariah Hack. I'm the Sustainability Program Manager at the Department of Transportation. I have 2 slides I wanted to share with you tonight. The first one up here right now is just expressing MoDOT's commitment to sustainability on many of our different plans. Starting with probably the biggest overarching plan we have, the transportation plan. It's a statewide plan that discusses climate equity and safety through every transportation decision we make. Then we also have a strategic action plan that aims more on agency operations. We do have a specific goal of reducing emissions from the transportation sector. A big part of that is electrifying the transportation system. Next up, I also want to touch on our action and resiliency roadmap that highlights some critical lifelines throughout the state that we want to prioritize, make sure we have specific designs where we're going into updating areas, sections of the road, those lifelines. And then probably most relevant to this group is the ODOT sustainability plan, which we updated last year. And that is a focus on internal operations. So our sustainability plan has several focus areas in it. The few that are most relevant from a planning commission standpoint, in my opinion, are listed on the slide here. Any one of these, I didn't really go into too much detail. I'm not sure exactly what you all would be interested in talking about the most, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So with that, I'll pass it on to the next presenter. Thanks.
For the record, my name is Tracy Wilder, and I'm the Facilities and Distribution Services Administrator for the Oregon Department of Corrections. And we do a lot of sustainability efforts, a lot of recycling efforts, but I'm here to talk about 2 specifically. So David. We have an agreement with the South Salem Area Plan that is to preserve over 100 acres of oaks mountains. So we have a lot of protected oaks out above Oregon State Correctional Institution in South Salem. And although we're not actively planting in that area, we do actively, we're not planting oaks, but we do plant other natural vegetation to that area and maintain it on a regular basis. We have approved by the adults and custodians that go out there and remove tansy, blackberry bushes, and things that are invasive and short in the area for the city of Salem. So during the last couple of winter storms, we did lose a few. So but we do strategically move other trees that are invasive and that might prevent the growth. So, one of our newest sustainability efforts includes installing rainwater collection systems. And so we're getting ready to install what you see there on that picture at Oregon State Penitentiary to collect the rainwater off of the rooftops. And we're going to store the water, test it, and then use it for planting on for irrigation, planting in our greenhouses if it's acceptable. So if we're successful in doing that, we're going to move it across the state to our 11 other institutions. Really, that's all I have, we do some, we actively are replacing boilers across the state, windows, roofs. Our boilers, we make sure are energy efficient, we pay for some of those things, so we work collectively with Energy Trust of Oregon. And make sure that we're doing the right thing to support it, so it's sustainable.
You're not doing Department of Corrections justice, so to speak.
No.
You guys have gotten like national awards for it.
We do, we have a national award for the sustainability program. Like I said, we do collect the steam out of steam traps, we recycle millions of pounds of cardboard, clothing, electronics, we strip wires and we recycle cardboard, the metal, it's immeasurable, the amount of work that goes across the state to make sure that we're sustainable and efficient resources and community footprint, so.
Hi, good evening, for the record. My name is Laura Albrani. I am the facilities manager for the Oregon Department of Forestry. What I would like to talk about a little bit tonight are a lot of the same strategies that the other two agencies that just preceded me have initiated. Next slide, please, Dave. I wanted to focus primarily on what, again, I thought you might be interested in this body, and that would be the energy efficiency piece. Back in 2016, when we enrolled in the Energy Trust of Oregon's energy management program, we established an energy team that took a comprehensive look at the age of our buildings, functionality of our buildings, and actually had an architect come in and evaluate every one of our structures on the Salem headquarters campus to help us decide what efficiencies we needed to focus on the most to be the most sustainable in the shortest amount of time. Excuse me. And we have been able to go forth with the following efforts of installing vehicle charging stations, doing LED lighting retrofits in our highest use campus buildings, which actually amounts to probably close to 20,000 square feet of space that we've actually been able to retrofit LED lighting into. We have historically maintained EUI targets in our Department of Energy seed report for each one of our buildings and have done extensive amounts of retrofitting for poorly functioning and aging HVAC systems. We've been able to take care of a lot of those things in the last couple of biennia. One of the challenges that we face with doing that again is with the capital construction costs. That's not a new story for anyone. A lot of times finding the money to do these things is a challenge. The most recent thing that we've done is we upgraded our building system and added a specific utility that allows us to monitor more different points across the campus so that we are able to tell just by logging in building use at any given time and how to manage the energy to meet the current use of the building. Next. And one of the things that we're pretty proud of is back in 2015, the reduction of water was a really important executive order. And we managed to reduce our irrigation load. I didn't put a percentage in here because at the time I created this, I didn't have an exact percentage, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 50% that we managed to achieve as part of our rehabilitation project for landscaping. Some of our landscaping is grass that goes through the main part of the campus, but we have a portion of the property that Buttsville Creek that we've actually reserved as a natural riparian area. And that is how it is treated, that is how it is maintained, and we've been able to, with our landscaping practices, we've been able to have a major reduction in water use. We provide sustainability news within our agency. We also provide sustainability news initiatives outside of our agency. I'm only really speaking to what facilities management does in the Salem campus. The rest of the Department of Forestry has different initiatives depending on division, state forests, fire protection, every single division that we have has a very specific mission as part of their overall goal of sustainability. And that was what I have for today. Thank you.
Hi, I'll stretch our last slide here. So I wanted to put this in here because and Chair Slater and I have talked about this a little bit. I know that we have a lot of touch points with you folks already, or the city, I should say, already. There's the Capital Planning Advisory Board, which the city is very well represented. Capital Planning Commission, some of the folks that you may have interacted with already. I think I saw some notes. Jeremy Miller is in my division. We work together all the time. So we all know each other. I know what's going on with these activities, and they know what's going on with me. So it's not disjointed. You know, we approach this in an integrated way. I've talked with folks in staff, city staff, about implementing a climate action plan, how we work together on that. I wanted to look at our urban tree cover on our state-owned properties. I know that there's some really good tools out there. Department of Forestry has a really good tree cover resource to look at where their tree cover may be deficient, you know, compared to targets and where there are opportunities. So that's something I think we can work on together. And then, of course, we've talked about habitat enhancement opportunities along stream corridors. We've all talked as a group about that, and all of us are open to that concept of collaborating and finding some projects to help enhance the habitat of Mill Creek and others here in the city. So again, more dialogue to be had, but that's what we have. So questions.
Thank you, it's very helpful. I told David earlier that we've had a number of presentations from the city of Salem about their work on sustainability and resiliency. And it was very helpful and eye-opening. And I think there was a lot more going on we fully understood. So that was a great briefing. It's helpful to hear what the state is doing in the city of Salem as well. Let me turn it over to my colleagues and see if they have any questions.
One question, you said that the $300 million for fleet replacement for EVs, is that total lump sum cost, or is that $300 million extra to replace the fleet than what we probably would have had to pay if we didn't do EVs?
So I have to channel our fleet parking manager because he's the one who came up with these numbers, but I think he was just looking at a snapshot in time where we are now. We have 4,200 light duty vehicles, and a certain percentage of those are EVs, pretty small. And if we were to take all those, replace all the ones that are not EVs, and put in all the charging we would need to support that, it would be about $300 million. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but that's.
I was kind of thinking, like, as the process of normal turnover happens, like say if the gas car is $60,000, the EV is $75,000, are we saying the cost of making this electrified is $75,000?
I see what you're saying, is it the incremental cost or?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. I can get back to you on that. I would guess that knowing our fleet manager, it's probably the incremental cost. So, and so that's what we do right now, is that when vehicles come of age and we retire them, usually we go to our surplus program, and then we will replace them with an EV if we can find one. So we're not just converting everything all at once. It's an organic process.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm excited about what they were doing here. So my question was about the EV chargers. You're installing lots of them, it sounds like. Are they available to the public to use when your offices aren't open, or what
how does the public interface with these? Are they strictly for state employees?
So they're all going in gas owned parking lots. We have several parking lots around Salem. We have parking structures, parking garages. And then we have, of course, the place where we keep our fleet. So a certain number of the chargers are going just to support charging our own fleet. But we have several that are going to be that are available. They're available now for public to use. So my building on 1225 Ferry Street, we put in, I think there are 6 or 8 dual head chargers, so 12 to 16 ports. You can go right now and go charge there. There's a fee for it. You have to charge by statute, but yeah, those are available for employees. You know, we don't get any special treatment. So when I drive my vehicle down to say, look, you know, to go to work, I plug in there and pay with my credit card. Yeah, so I don't know the exact ratio, but yes, there are.
Thank you. I think that in itself brings us closer to our climate. It's just you're providing the infrastructure.
Thank you all for the presentation. I echo Commissioner Tubbs' comments about it being exciting to see everything the state is doing, and yeah, obviously sustainability is crucial for our continued growth. I did have just a programming question with the Department of Corrections sustainability program. Does that incorporate vocational training? Thinking about it from a social impact sustainability standpoint, are there vocational programs across those different initiatives and programs?
So yes, we have in Mattress at DeRidge Correctional Institution, we have a sagebrush program where AICs cultivate sagebrush to plant back in the community. In Wilsonville, we have a butterfly program where we're going soon, we cultivate butterflies and mix them. In Salem, we're just starting a building operator certification program. So AICs will register, we've been given a grant, and when they're released in the community, they'll be certified. So there's a few programs that we do that they're part of. They are part of the in Salem Central Distribution Center on State Street. We have a recycling center there, so we have all the semi trucks that go and make deliveries to the institutions. They come back empty sometimes, but sometimes they bring back recycled materials, and that's where we recycle them. We have a group of individuals that are part of that recycling as well. Learn those skills and go out. Job skills, job.
I've been told the recycling processors love your cardboard because it's always so clean. Yeah. It's pretty unique though, and it's a really neat place to see, you know, the recycling, the sorting we have.
We can do a sort. So as you can imagine, we have thousands of boxes that go out with, you know, tomatoes, ketchup, whatever, and out to the institutions. And so that cardboard comes back, it's sorted, it's clean, we try to make sure that it's dry, and we remove plastic and whatnot, and then we have a compactor and we send it out for recycling. So we're trying to get a contract in place to recycle plastic as well. So I know we're close to that. And we did have a contract for recycling our clothing out of Brooks, but they went out of business, so we're actively searching for a recycle vendor. And our clothes are stacking up in the warehouse. Salvation Army has this.
Other questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Rhodes, please.
Just one question, when you're talking about the building process of rebuilding, or well, not rebuilding, but new building versus rehabbing. How many of the current state buildings are on the historical register?
Ooh. I am not sure. I know that we ran into that. We just did some remodeling for the Justice Building, and I don't know the answer to that. I do know it comes up quite a bit. So
I'm just curious how that process goes with following those rules with sustainability.
Yeah.
conversation, so.
Well, I know that in that Justice Building, there was we did some window placements to make more efficient windows, and that's we had to go through the State Historic Preservation Office to make sure it matched each other. But happy to find out for you if you'd like.
I am very curious. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I have just one or two questions. I'd be interested if people know what is the just the total acreage for each agency and what is the kind of the building mass footprint on them. So how many acres of building? If people know that here in Salem.
I have close to 4,000 acres of land across the state of Oregon. You can test me here, 57.
I can't hear you.
4,000 acres of land and I think close to 57 million square feet.
Statewide. That's it.
I had a sense you were gonna ask that question, so I asked our real estate folks if they could give me that, you know, the acreage breakdown by agency in Salem. And we didn't have that, at their fingertips, but I'm sure we can get that. So I'd like to know that too.
And also, for ODOT, I would be interested in particularly understanding their acreage footprint and some of the management plans for the land that they own in Salem. I see every time I look at that, I see little pieces scattered all over the city, and I'm wondering what the overall footprint is, and then what the management strategy is. I think exactly right. You and I actually emailed each other a little bit not too long ago. Some wetland area here in Salem that's owned by ODOT. So I'd be very interested in that, especially when we're looking at all right away and how that is managed. I would be very interested in understanding that a little bit more.
Commissioner Slater, so for clarification, there's ODOT owns a lot of land across the state, and there's like right of way compared to maintenance facilities compared to office facilities. Are you interested in the management of all of those different lands, or?
Well, to make it just a tiny little bit easier, just Salem.
Okay.
Not the state of Oregon, but which I have no influence.
Yeah.
But just the city, yeah.
I think the whole concept of master planning is an area that, from my perspective, we probably focus on a little more. We tend to look at individual buildings. We're doing a big, we call it a facility condition assessment, which is done every 5 years, looking at the condition of all of our state buildings. But that doesn't extend to sites. So I think there's an opportunity there.
I don't know, Lisa, if you want to take a shot at explaining what the capital planning commission is. The past year, you've been involved for years.
Yeah, sure. So, well, we have a planning commissioner president that's on it, and the city of Salem City mayor is on it. And then it's a commission appointed by the governor, and they come together and talk about state buildings, specifically in Salem, the Capitol Mall, and we're working on master plans right now, which will pretty out of date for the state mall, or Capitol Mall, excuse me. And then any kind of capital projects that would be happening in Salem, goes to the Capital Planning Commission. Feedback on those projects with the funding, to come to the city for permitting.
So I believe there are 5 master plans. So there's the Capitol, there's the fairgrounds, there's South Salem, and there's 1 or 2 other areas that I can't remember off the top of my head. So my understanding is that the planning commission, the Capital Planning Commission, they had a bit of a lull for a few years, and has recently gone through the process of updating their mandate and their internal regulations, and are now starting the process of developing new master plans, starting with the Capitol Mall. So there's like a good opportunity, I think, for the city and the state to work together to move forward on this. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree, 100%.
Anything else before we move on to the exciting topic? We'll take just a minute break so you all can gather your things and take leave. And again, I really appreciate you taking your time out Yeah, thank you for having to spend an hour with us. Thank you. Let me call recess. Jennifer has to read a criteria here on this, the moral, and then we'll have some public testimony. That order right? All right, let's go ahead.
This is a public hearing to consider case number CA 2502 for proposed amendments to the Salem Revised Code, updating the city zoning and development code, known as the Unified Development Code. Purpose of the hearing is to consider proposed amendments to the Salem Revised Code to comply with the Federal Emergency Management Agency's requirements relating to the National Flood Insurance Program Endangered Species Act integration in Oregon. The changes will now require a habitat assessment for new development in the special flood hazard area and update other sections of the UDC to incorporate the process changes applicable to these new provisions. The criteria applicable to this hearing are listed in the Salem Revised Code under chapters 1.0.085. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing, the statements are evidence sufficient to afford the planning commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue, includes appeal to the land use board of appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. Planning commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Again, my name is Laurel Christian. I'm an infrastructure planner with the city of Salem, here to present code amendment 25-02 for floodplain development code amendments. Robin Dalkey, the floodplain administrator, is also here with me this evening to help me answer any questions that we have. At this time, I would like to enter the staff report, public comments received, and supplemental staff report into the record. The supplemental staff report that was issued this morning corrects a few dates which are relevant to the history of how we got here and also addresses some public comments. There are also a lot of acronyms with this presentation, so I did print a sheet and a small desk to help you with those, but I will try to find them as we go. So for this presentation, I'll briefly provide a description of the history of the National Flood Insurance Program Endangered Species Act integration in Oregon, discuss short-term implementation options, also known as pre-compliance implementation measures or PICM. I'll discuss the city's chosen PICM option, the permit by permit approach, and how it will impact Salem on a local level. After that background information, I will discuss the proposed amendments and public testimony received. And then lastly, we'll go over the approval criteria and staff recommendation. So in 2009, a lawsuit was filed against FEMA by several environmental groups for failure to consult with the Endangered Species Act, ESA, Section 7. The settlement agreement required FEMA to request formal consultation from the National Marine Fisheries Service, or NIMS, on aspects of the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP. NIMS then issued a 2016 biological opinion on the National Flood Insurance Program in Oregon, which led to the development of the draft Oregon Implementation Plan in 2021 to ensure the NFIP was complying with ESA requirements. The plan establishes performance standards for NFIP participating communities in Oregon to protect ESA listed species and their habitats, emphasizing no net loss of natural floodplain functions that support endangered species. FEMA is now evaluating proposed changes to the NFIP outlined in the long-term implementation plan through an environmental impact statement, or EIS, in compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. The final implementation plan is anticipated in 2026, following the record of decision in the EIS process. And then FEMA will fully implement the plan in 2027. So until then, communities have been told that they need to begin taking action to protect habitat and achieve no net loss. FEMA's notified communities in July of last year, provided draft resources in August of last year, and asked communities to select how they would receive ESA protections by December 1st of last year. So for the short-term implementation, FEMA has developed pre-compliance implementation measures, also known as PICM. FEMA's required participating NFIP communities to comply with the chosen PICM in the interim period while the full implementation plan is being reviewed through the NEPA process. Long-term implementation will likely require an additional code amendment depending on the results of the review. And in November of 2024, City Council directed staff to notify FEMA that we would begin a code amendment process to implement option 3, the permit by permit approach, and directed staff to draft code amendments to implement that approach. In order to remain in compliance with these NFIP requirements, we are bringing the proposed code amendments before you this evening for a public hearing. Salem has nearly 4,000 acres of property within our city limits that are identified as special flood hazard area with nearly 3,000 existing structures. Most of the remaining special flood hazard area that are undeveloped today are within public zones that are generally reserved for parks and open space. For reference, Minto Brown Island Park is over 1,000 acres of land in the special flood hazard area and is not zoned for dense development. However, we do have approximately 800 undeveloped acres zoned as residential, mixed use, industrial, and commercial land. I also want to note that Salem has a locally adopted floodplain, which we call IFHA, or interim flood hazard area, which are shown on this map in red. The locally adopted floodplains are required to comply with construction standards and were really intended for protection of property and people. And that's why they comply with the construction standards in the floodplain. However, they are not regulated by the federal insurance requirements for the NFIP. So as such, these standards are not subject to the exemption, The IFHA areas are not subject to this code amendment, as we've included an exemption for those, because they're not subject to FEMA's NFIP requirements. So the city processes 150 to 200 floodplain development reviews annually. However, there are only about 4 to 5 structure permits issued each year. So to put this into perspective, we issue an average of 400 new dwelling permits each year. So about 1% of new structures are actually located within the floodplain. The majority of permit reviews are for improvements to existing buildings or utility repair or replacement work, which will not need to comply with these new standards. These new standards are primarily for new development and do not impact the existing structures or development. So the overarching goal of the code amendment is to comply with these new NFIP requirements that align with the Endangered Species Act. If we don't comply with the NFIP standards, we risk losing our community ratings flood insurance discounts, which are currently 35%. We risk losing federally backed flood insurance and risk losing the ability to receive federal disaster relief and loans for not complying with NFIP standards. The code amendment ensures NFIP compliance by adopting a permit by permit review that requires all development in the special flood hazard area to complete a habitat assessment to ensure there are no net loss and essential habitat functions that FEMA has determined are critical to endangered species, which are floodplain storage, water quality, and riparian vegetation. So the permit by permit approach, also referred to as habitat assessment, will not prohibit development in the floodplain. The habitat assessment requires mitigation for new development in the floodplain that ensures no net loss of essential floodplain functions that support endangered species. For example, if a development necessitates removal of a tree in the floodplain, there will be mitigation based on the size of the tree removed. Additionally, there will be mitigation requirements for new impervious surfaces and placement of fill in the floodplain. The habitat assessment will require a mitigation plan for each floodplain function that FEMA has identified to ensure compliance with the ICCM in the Endangered Species Act. FEMA has created a habitat assessment methodology, which will be used to complete assessments and for staff review of assessments. The city has also developed a template habitat assessment form for residential development, which strictly follows the habitat assessment methodology drafted by FEMA that can be used for small developments and hopes these requirements are not overly burdensome. Now on to the code amendment itself. So the first chapter proposed to be amended is 220, which establishes site plan review requirements. So the current code states that a class 3 site plan review is required for any project which includes a geologic assessment required under 810. And the code makes no reference to the floodplain overlay zone. The proposed amendments remove the submission of a geotechnical report as a trigger for a class 3 site plan review and instead add the submission of habitat assessment as a trigger. Geotechnical reports are not technically related to floodplain, but we were touching that chapter, so this is an amendment that we want to include as we were updating the code as well, because we found that geotechnical reports are not discretionary, they don't need to trigger a class 3 site plan review. However, in contrast, habitat assessments do involve or may involve discretionary review and will likely require mitigation measures based on the assessment findings. So the level of staff discretion and potential mitigation to be a condition of development requires the use of a class 3 site plan review or a type 2 procedure. So as a result, that is why the habitat assessment is a trigger for a class 3 site plan review. The next chapter being amended is chapter 300, which describes land use procedures. We are updating this section to implement the type 1 and type 2 floodplain development permits, which are described on the next slide a bit. We also propose to establish a 4-year expiration date on floodplain development permit, which is consistent with other permits that we have on the site plan review. And the current code does not establish an expiration for a floodplain development permit. They essentially expire upon change of ownership of the property. So lastly, the chapter 600, which is the floodplain overlay zone, is being amended to include new standards and reorganization. Modifications to the floodplain development permit and floodplain overlay zone variance sections are largely reorganization of existing code and standardizing these permit sections to be similar to other types of permits in the Salem revised code. The addition of the class 1 and class 2 floodplain development permits is required to implement the habitat assessment requirements. There are some exemptions for habitat assessments in this code, and the permits which do not require habitat assessment will be processed as a class 1 floodplain development permit, and then the ones that require a habitat assessment will be processed as a class 2 habitat assessment, which allows for some of those more discretionary reviews. So the code also updates the flood zone construction standards for floodplain development permits to clarify existing standard definitions that enclosed areas below the base flood elevation are not to be used for parking or storage. And the new habitat assessment section in SRC 601-100 establishes the requirement to submit a habitat assessment, and it establishes some exemptions. The exemptions are from previous guidance documents from FEMA, as well as the habitat assessment guidance document that FEMA published last year. So there are public comments included in the staff report, supplemental staff report, and then one additional comments that I received today that was forwarded to the commission via email. FEMA provided written comments with minor revisions to the proposed code, which have also been incorporated into the version of amendments that are attached to the staff report. I received numerous phone calls and questions regarding the amendment, though we did receive somewhat limited written testimony. Two of the public comments we received were in support of the proposed amendments, and one comment requested a copy of the staff report but did not provide any opinion for or against the amendment. Two additional comments in opposition of the amendment were received after writing the staff report, which are included in the supplemental and then the email today. These comments in opposition generally state that the amendments will make development more difficult and expensive. The additional comments in opposition question the validity of the public notice, though staff finds notice and requires to have all been met as described in supplemental staff report issued today. The letter in opposition of the amendments provided to the commission this afternoon also claims that FEMA and the city's actions violate the U.S. Constitution, Oregon Constitution, and statewide planning goals. Staff believes that the city has ample rational basis for the proposed code amendments and that it does not violate constitutional rights, as it does not prohibit uses or development in floodplain and requires a mitigation. So the approval criteria are listed in SRC 110.085. Staff recommended findings for how the approval criteria are met are provided within the staff report. Staff finds that the proposed amendments meet the approval criteria. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the facts and findings of the staff report and recommends the council approve the proposed amendments as presented by staff. Thank you, and I can take any questions.
All right, let's open it up. Any questions from the world? Commissioner Reardon.
I have one question. I don't know who is the best person to answer this, but I guess my understanding of the gist of most of this letter from NOPUM law is that there's some sort of unlawful coercion from the federal government against the state or against the city as a subdivision of the state. Wouldn't the federal government be the more appropriate party to send that letter to? I mean, if it's an unlawful coercion of the federal government on our state rights, would we be the person that should respond to that, or would that be more appropriately responded to by the federal government?
I'll let Dan take that one.
Hi, Dan Atkinson, City Attorney. Good to be here tonight, thank you. Yeah, I believe you're correct. The comments relate to the agency's, federal authority to do this and some of the, to coercion, terms like that. This is the city taking the action, and his comments really don't relate to the criteria for approval. It's more of a discretionary decision by the city and its concerns on that basis. Whether he's right or wrong on that, would be the end.
Thank you. Other questions?
Thank you. Question. Apologies. Bringing up the apology. I told President Slater that I had to leave here and he was sorry that I missed the end of this conversation. But So I guess I missed this in the report, but you mentioned it verbally now, overall about IFHAs. Could we include those as part of the amendment, or would that require some other process?
They could be included in the code amendment. We currently have an exemption written in, and so we need to strike that.
Can I just ask clarification? We didn't send those to people in those particular areas of the.
I don't believe so. It was only properties within the special flood hazard area.
What was the consequence of making a motion tonight be?
We would need to stop the process and send them stuff.
So then so we could, under Commissioner Larman, could ask that we have a public hearing and address that issue at a later date.
Correct. The process would be for us to close the hearing or suspend the hearing, have staff send notice out, give opportunity for those folks to have notice to come.
So it's not ruled out.
I'll follow up question then. So could I make a motion to have a hearing about that separate from this? To have this process move forward and then come back, so as to not reinvent this process.
I think what you're suggesting is a separate code amendment just affecting that area. Yes, we can do that.
Thank you. Maximum flexibility, that's what we're doing. I have a few questions if I could. Could you, do you have a question, please go ahead.
I think it's a pretty quick one. The special flood hazard area, floodplain hazard area, is that inclusive of floodway areas or is it only floodplain?
It would be the floodway as well as the floodplain. The distinction there though is that we do have 500-year floodplain, which is not regulatory, that's a zone X. And the city doesn't regulate that, but we do regulate all of the AD floodplain, the 100-year floodplain as well as the floodway. So this would apply to the floodway and that 100-year floodplain.
And are we including separate mitigation requirements for floodway versus floodplain? So that's more intensive need.
In the habitat mitigation assessment guidance document, if you are within 170 feet of actual water body, then you will have a higher mitigation ratio. It's not explicitly written into the ordinance, but it is within the mitigation guidance document, and that we will be using to review these.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. So you said we have about 4,000 acres of floodplain, is that correct? And right now we have 800 acres that are in private hands and undeveloped.
That's correct.
Okay, so really the impact on this is going to be on the undeveloped properties. That's the primary impact. And then, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's correct. It's going to impact any new development. If a site does decide they want to tear down their building and rebuild, we would also be looking at that with floodplain development permit. We don't see those too often, but primarily undeveloped existing undeveloped properties, yes.
Okay. And then in terms of mitigation, I'm really interested in what this no net loss is. If you could help me understand no net loss, I mean, does that involve things like mitigation banks? Like what does that involve and how are we monitoring? I'm very interested in.
So the current code does not include a mitigation bank. That's not something that we have set up at this point. The final implementation plan does include an option for in the draft, does include the option for the city to set up a mitigation bank. So like I said, we'd probably be coming back to you with a code amendment when FEMA has done their long-term implementation of this, and that could be included with something like that. In interim, the no net loss is for the 3 floodplain functions, which I brought the slide back up because it kind of has this table when I see it's a little hard to read. So the floodplain functions that the habitat assessment is going to be looking at are floodplain storage, water quality, and vegetation. So floodplain storage is essentially undeveloped space. And so undeveloped space, if you have to set aside area on your property to be undeveloped if you are developing that space. This is going to be primarily for fill in the floodplain and ensuring there's a cut fill balance. And then water quality is pervious surfaces. So we will treat new impervious surfaces by providing water quality treatment. A lot of our projects already require some kind of water quality treatment if they're greater than 5,000 square feet. So that one probably won't be very significant because most of our projects are triggering green stormwater infrastructure anyways. And then again, vegetation, so riparian vegetation, if you're removing trees, you're required to replant. So those are the three floodplain functions and essentially how you mitigate for them. And there are, on the next slide, a smaller table from the mitigation assessment guide that talks about what those ratios are for different, the different floodplain functions. And so when we get a development project, we would essentially be looking at each of these functions, how they're being impacted and how you're mitigating.
So if I have a 10,000 square foot lot and I decide to put a 5,000 foot building on that, where's the mitigation of that 5,000 foot space?
It will depend it could potentially require a smaller building, but I think, so for space, it's within the about the bill piece of it, because I think that's one.
Yeah, what's tough at Robin Dahlke at Floodplain Administrative Development Services, City of Salem. What's tough to answer that question, why we, one of the reasons with the permit by permit approach is there's site characteristics that we have to look at to see what mitigation ratio needs to be used. So in your example, if the land that was being developed was already, the elevation of the existing land was at or above the base flood elevation, it could still be mapped in the floodplain, but if it's at or above, in theory, by adding a 5,000 square foot structure, you're not removing any undeveloped space, which is that first floodplain function, because undeveloped space is defined as the area between the base flood elevation and the existing grade. Now, if this property was low and was subject to flood waters coming in that area, then if the 5,000 square foot footprint was placed and you weren't within that 170 foot buffer, then it'd be a 1-to-1 ratio where you would have to find 5,000. It's looking at cubic fill, so you have to find 5,000, whatever the depth of fill you need to put on that space to elevate the home. You need to find that equivalent cubic yardage elsewhere on the property and remove and create undeveloped space. So that could look like going to the stream side portion of the property and excavating out below the base flood elevation area and then restoring that to plant and provide some flood conveyance area for fish passage is really the idea of that space.
Fish passage is the focus here, because that's
Ingress and egress, so allowing a space for, if there is a flood, fish to enter onto that floodplain property and then be able to exit that property and not be trapped when the floodwaters recede.
so it's not really a habitat issue, it's a conveyance, it's a movement transportation issue.
I think it's all of those with the combination of the three floodplain functions.
But habitat really isn't in the floodplain function. We have vegetation, floodwater storage, and
And
water
treatment.
quality, yeah.
So I guess you can say that all of those things impact the habitat for the fish if they're.
I hear a lawyer in the future saying there's no habitat in the code.
There's an assessment.
I'll turn it over to some of my colleagues here. I think I saw some hands up, Mr. Rhodes too.
Yes, one question, as far as what this impacts for, so new construction, it's impacting that. If an existing structure was there and we're adding to that structure or an ADU, is that impacted as well?
Yes, it would be anything that is outside of the existing footprint of the home.
But an example, if you had a 5,000 square foot structure, you demolished it and rebuilt it, there would be no net loss because that was an existing structure. Now, if you replace it with a 7,000 square foot structure, you're looking at that additional 2,000 square feet.
Okay, at this point, maybe we should go to public testimony. All right, so Mr. Byerly, you are up, sir. Let us know who you are. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. For the record, Ken Beerley, I live 2308 Tarleton Street, West Salem. I have to get a floodplain notice because our property is partially floodplain. Fortunately, our house is not a long part of the property, and it's simply a subdivision lot. But I'd like to talk a little bit about why you're here. I'm very familiar with the 2009 lawsuit that led to this, and then the interagency gyrations that drug out over nearly 2 decades to get here. I think what you need to be aware of is that the concern here, because of the National Marine Fisheries Service or NOAA Fisheries biological opinion that focuses on upper Willamette River spring Chinook salmon and upper Willamette River steelhead, which are both listed as threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. And in the Salem area, those juvenile fish that are produced upriver are using the floodplain during high water times as rearing areas. When the water rises in the winter, they get out of the main channel, they come onto the floodplain. That's where they feed, that's where they grow larger. So I think it's important to understand that that's kind of the focus. We're not too worried about 7 resident killer whales here in Salem. I've been working with the city staff on the development of floodplain species assessment. We have developed and drafted the final product in January that identifies all of the listed species, both plant and animal, that are either occur or are likely to occur in the floodplains of Mill Creek, Claggett Creek, West Fork of Pudding River, and Willamette floodplain particularly. But the focus of that is this requirement out of the biological opinion of the National Marine Fisheries Service is on the 2 species that are listed species that use the Willamette River. They do come into the Mill Creek, but there is, to my knowledge, no spawning run of spring Chinook salmon in Mill Creek. So it's all juvenile salmon use. At present time, I'm also working with the staff on development of what's called the Natural Floodplain Functions Plan, which goes beyond just the regulatory piece, but looks at opportunities for restoration, both the Willamette and Mill Creek system. If we get a final document, it'll probably come to the Planning Commission for review, comment sometime in the future. But Salem, I think it's really important to understand that Salem has one of the highest rated floodplain management programs in the country. Floodplain, the community rating system that the federal government gives you a cut rate on your flood insurance. There are only 12 communities of the 1,700 participating communities in floodplain programs that have a higher rating than Salem. 12 out of 1,770. I think it's a kind of hidden from most people, but it's really important to understand. There's a vigorous in the floodplain, the Salem floodplain program that was approved by City Council in December last year, is something that Salem should be proud of because it protects people and it protects other critters that live on the floodplains, and I think that's really important. The proposed ordinance is an appropriate response to a regulatory requirement. There is a war between the protecting people in the floodplain, protecting resources in the floodplain. That's been resolved or is being resolved through the interagency effort through how the Endangered Species Act interacts with other federal regulations. And communities around this, the west, the northwest are being taught that because of the listed, dominantly because of listed endangered fish species. And the proposed ordinance is a really good interim solution, recognizing that there will be a longer term debate over this through the environmental impact statement process that's going on. This debate has been going on for better than 20 years. It isn't over yet, but this is a way to make sure that the city is in compliance. It's doing what's necessary. It's looking forward to the future. So I encourage the planning commission to support the approach proposed, recognize that strong leadership by the city planning, and adopt the case number, the case number CA 2502 as the findings that are prepared by staff. Thank you. I'd be glad to answer questions. Yeah.
Are there any questions here? Can I have one or two questions? First of all, you testified here before. Could you explain your background? I think it's relevant, so just let me know your background.
I'm an old guy. I've been around for a long time. I have a degree in biology, a master's degree from Colorado. I had a small consulting firm for a decade. I went to work for the state lands. I was the manager of the what was then the Division of State Lands, what program for 13 years. I was on the staff of Governor Kitzhaber's natural resource staff for between 96 and 99, and then deputy director of the Oregon Watershed and Management Report until I retired in 2013.
Great.
So I've been around a while.
Thank you. I want to get back to your point about rearing area. And I guess that's what I was really interested in. So this proposal lists floodplain, the 3 floodplain functions. The rearing area, or rearing habitat is not included in that. Do you see that as a problem?
I don't. That's really what they're trying to get at with fill and impervious surface. What they're trying to do is maintain some sort of natural surface in the area that fish have access to. So when you deal with vegetation, you have reasonable water quality, and you have available for flooding access and egress. That's habitat. So I don't think you need the term to get to what the benefit is.
That's helpful. Thank you. All right, thank you. I believe we have Mr. Carrasco. Welcome.
Is it okay if I interpret?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And please give your name, your address or ward.
His name?
Yep, address or ward, whichever. You have 5 minutes.
Jose Carrasco, my name, my address, 865 22nd Street, Southeast.
Okay, so basically, we're having a little bit of a hard time understanding the amendment. We're just wondering what's gonna happen to people that have residential homes in the area. With somebody that's on a very fixed income, retired, a lot of the people on this block have already paid off their homes. So I guess we're just curious what that means for the people in the residential area. Are they gonna have to sell? Are they able to still live in the premises?
Right, so one of the challenges here in the planning commission is that we're here to take testimony on staff reports. So we're not in a position to answer questions back and forth.
Okay.
That's not what we're here for, but I'm sure if you want to hang out just a little bit, the staff can actually answer those questions.
Okay.
And it's not quite as alarming as the cases that you've described.
Okay.
But that would be the best resolution.
Okay, works for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't need to put you off.
No, it's okay, thank you.
All right, is there anyone else who would like to testify? All right, oh, yes, please, come on down.
Apologize for
No,
filling the shoes. It's okay.
yeah, please. And please, just your name and address or ward. And you have 5 minutes.
Peter Strawhall, residence 2440 Laurel Avenue Northeast, Salem, Oregon, 97301. And several residences, one of which we received a notice about, 425 Ewald Avenue Southeast, Salem, Oregon, 97302. I am an architect by trade, and I've been involved with a number of development projects, somebody's back porch, church building, throughout the country. And I'm located in Salem, Oregon with some of my business partners, some of which are here today. And we were a little confused by the flyer. We work with the city regularly, sometimes daily. We were here earlier today with some questions on permits, and we just wanted to let you know, the city engineer, that we weren't necessarily clear about what the rules were, even though that's a little bit of our trade. And just to let you know that it would be helpful to have a little bit of a more informative flyer that's sent out or whatnot. And that is all really had to say. We support controlling flood, and we appreciate the habitats and species that are in our community and make our state just a fantastic state to be in, one of the best places in the world. And so we are going to be developing an 11-acre parcel, 10.75 acre parcel that has a house on it, and it has a house that was torn down a while ago with the permits. And so even though we've done a wetland study and we've had a lot of consulting documents prepared, we're not necessarily sure how this would relate. And that's something that we could talk to staff afterwards, so we'll let you guys know. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, well, I will close the public hearing. I will look to a motion for vice president. Seconded, I guess, so we can have some more discussion as needed.
Okay, I move to adopt the staff report for case number CA 25-02.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Tev. Is there any discussion? All right, well, I will tell you, I had a bunch of motions ready to go, but Ken dissuaded me. So you're lucky. I don't have to give a bottle of vodka or anything to Lisa to apologize for our long delay and be able to get out of here quickly. So since I don't have anything and no one else has anything, we will just go right to a vote, please, Jennifer.
Commissioner Pop?
Aye.
Commissioner Freda?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Commissioner Todd?
Aye.
Commissioner Stewart?
Aye.
Commissioner Rio.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, thank you very much. I think at this point, we have no special orders of business. Is that correct? I think we are zipping right along to the administrator's report. On subcommittee report. Buy yourself 5 minutes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to have a quick brief update on the education subcommittee. So myself, Commissioner Tab, and Commissioner Ekip were invited by the city staff to attend the Salem Bike Summit. It is the second event that has been held under that name. Last year and this year, members of the bicycling community, which includes Bicycle Shop Owners, the Salem Bicycle Club, Salem Bike Vision, and a member of CATSI. And this year, members of the Salem Planning Commission Transportation Subcommittee were invited to discuss with city staff on future plans and current efforts to make it safer to ride a bicycle in the city of Salem. It went pretty well. I was kind of astonished that something like this was going on. I was only surprised, and yeah, I feel like it was a pretty productive meeting. We voiced some priorities as the subcommittee that we would really like to see updated standards and some more tools to use. As, you know, say the people comes up and concerned about traffic or speeding or safety for people riding bicycles, to have kind of the tools to address those concerns. So, yeah, that's all I've got.
Thank you. The Wetlands Committee has had a number of conversations. I don't know, I think the outcome has been to embrace the current process. Is that a fair summary of where we're at? Partly in recognition that there is a limited capacity for action. So, it's a number of conversations. And I think did I mention that I did attend the Oregon Sustainability Board meeting? I did. I mentioned that? Yes, okay. Off to Lisa.
Thank you. The only thing I have to talk about is our annual report to council, so I'm working on that. And later gonna write a letter from the president, not required, but we leave space for you. And I was hoping that I could have volunteers from the subcommittees to write a little paragraph about the point of a subcommittee and what you achieve or want to achieve. Or what the hopes and dreams are for your subcommittee here. Can I have a volunteer from the subcommittee? Right, use.
Well,
Great,
Volunteer for transportation.
great. Those are the only two subcommittees we have now, right? Yes, okay, good. Great, so ideally, we'll have the draft plan out at maybe the end of the month with the goal of taking council like May or June, depending on your availability via councils. That's all I have, thank you.
Lisa, were you gonna follow up on what exactly format you needed to send or
Paragraph, English would be great. Yep, and I'll put it into the report and I'll send it out and somebody desktop publishing. Make it pretty, all those kinds of things. I'll send you an email reminding you of your assignment.
any comments for the good of the order? All right, seeing that, we're adjourned. Thank you.